Hey guys, Oxab here. Today I'm going to be talking about fire and how to animate it. So first off, let's talk about what fire is. Fire is, well, energy, and it's like the result of something getting burnt. Like it needs fuel in order to exist, it has to burn. And fire has different colors depending on how hot it is. So I made a little scale down here. So first off, it's, well, black or infrared, and then it goes closer towards red the hotter it gets. I'm going to draw because I think my cursor might not be showing. So it starts here cold, then it gets red when it gets hotter, and here it gets more like a normal fire color, like a candle. That's a ugly candle, but yeah. Then it gets yellow, and then here eventually it goes white, and that's very hot. Then here it starts to turn blue, and you might have seen when you're lighting a candle that it can be like orange on the outside, and then close to the wick it's blue, and that's because it's very hot close to the wick. And then it keeps on going and gets darker blue, and then it goes into ultraviolet, and that's when it's very hot. So let's take a look at some examples of how I have animated fire. Here's a very simple example, simple fire I call it. It's just like a bunch of strings swaying back and forth. Did I say swings? Strings, ropes, whatever, tails. And I'll show you each individual one, because this one I had several different layers. And for all of them there is a source here in the middle, if it would let me draw. And you can see how it's constantly coming from this source. And I just sway it back and forth. You can add a little trail by the tip of it. And yeah, let's see the other ones. Here's the second one, the large one, and it's the same principle. I just made them move differently so they wouldn't like follow the exact same trail. Here's a tiny one, and then I made one long tiny one that moves very randomly, and together it all looks kind of cool. It looks like some sort of weird flame-ish thingy. And I also added a little white thing in the middle. If I had been smart, I should have had it the opposite way, like have the white on the outside and the blue inside, because blue is hotter. But yeah, this was just a funny thing I made. Okay, here's another example of a bit more eye-pleasing fire flame thingy. So same as the last thing, this one has a source here. If it will let me draw, come on, what's wrong with you? There. So yeah, this one follows the physics of actual fire better. So you can see that it all climbs upwards, like this. And that's how fire works, because it's hot. Hot air always climbs upwards, so that's why it's all moving that way. And even these ones that go like slightly outwards, they don't continue in that direction, but they start that way and then they slowly start to turn and go straight upwards, as you can see. And that's how fire works. You can launch it in a direction, but then it eventually just goes back to where it is supposed to go. They can sway back and forth a little bit like this, depending on like wind and such. But yeah. And I made another example that follows the same principle. Whoops. What type of layer is that? It has the source. Come on, work. There. I need a different color. It has a source there in the bottom here. Come on, let me draw! There. It's lagging for some reason. But yeah, it starts there as like a fire-ish explosion, and then they all climb up upwards. I'll play this. I have the wrong frame rate. I think it's 30 for this one. It's very tiny. But yeah. But for this one, I made it explode in all directions. In the beginning, it goes towards you. It's like on a 3D plane. Come on, there. And it also goes outwards, and it goes upwards, like in all directions, everywhere. But you can see eventually all these particles start going upwards once they slow down. So you can see these ones, they start going that way, and then they change its curve and start going like this and going upwards, because that's how fire works. And then I made another example, and you might see what animation this is from, otherwise I'm sad. But yeah, this is a flamethrower, and naturally it would be impossible for fire to exist like this without any type of fuel or source, whatever. But when you make a flamethrower like this, pretend there is fuel. Like he has a tank on his back and he's shooting fuel this direction. And you can see there's like a beam of fire in the middle that goes this way. But then it stops because at this point all fuel has burned out. So you can see along the way there are particles going upwards throughout this whole thing. Keeps going upwards because it's burning, it's disintegrating. And you can see some fuel also falls down during this thing, but eventually you can see, even though this has fallen down here, when it turns into fire and heats up, it starts going upwards. Fire always goes upwards when it turns into fire. Eventually it always goes up. So that's something you have to keep in mind when you make fire. And it doesn't have to follow this exact style that I have animated, because my style may be very different from yours, but it should follow this principle. When it breaks up into particles, make the particles fly upwards. I've seen a lot of people who animate fire where the particles just continue in the same direction they were initially, and that looks very unrealistic. Away you go. And here's another example. I made this for a collaboration, and it's more of an anime type of fire. And well, there's not much to say on this one, different from the other one, except that it has a way different style. But imagine there's fuel, and that he shoots the fuel out of his mouth, and well, I don't know how this works, but yeah, he shoots the fuel in a big cluster of liquid, and the liquid is burning. And well, you don't see the whole flamethrower because I cut it off here on the edge of the canvas, but here in the end it should be like disintegrating and turning into, well, particles disappearing. And also, if you wanna be take a step further, fire should also change colors as it goes on. If you looked at a real flamethrower, you can see that maybe when it had reached this point, it would turn black in a lot of places, or well, a darker red and then black, and eventually it would poof out into smoke clouds when it breaks down into its particles. And that's because it cools down, and yeah, fire can't sustain itself all the way until it's, well, it's broken apart. It cools down and it turns into the burnt fuel turns into smoke and it disappears. Well, yeah, I think that's all I have to say about how fire works and how it should be animated. So I'm going to show you an animation process of me animating fire. So yeah, thanks for watching and keep watching now.